Buenas noches a todos y a todas de nuevo. Soy Debralee Santos, editora del Manhattan Times y Bronx Free Press, que son periódicos bilingües de la comunidad. Ahora me escuchan, ¿verdad? Ok. Este foro, como saben ustedes, es bilingüe. Haremos cambios y haremos entre un idioma y el otro para que todos podamos saciarnos de la información de esta noche. Le damos a todos la bienvenida y ante todo el aprecio por haberse prestado a esta obra esta noche, a prestarnos de su tiempo, de su atención, de su gracia. Este foro es de ustedes, para ustedes, y estamos para escuchar y entendernos y tener el diálogo necesario dentro de nuestra comunidad. Así que gracias a todos. Como saben ustedes, como les dije, es un foro bilingüe. Comenzaremos con lo que es la guardiana, una de ellas de aquí de la iglesia, Iglesia Santa Cruz, que es, aquí está ella, Germania, que quería dar la bienvenida de su parte.
Sí, gracias. Muchísimas gracias, queridos hermanos. Nuestra Iglesia Santa Cruz, siempre con las puertas abiertas para toda la comunidad. Sean todos y todas bienvenidos.
Just to say a welcome to all of you, and as Jackie, my co-warden, has already said, this is a church of the open door. And one thing that I like to play around with in English is take Holyrood, take those last four letters, turn it around, and it becomes door. Holyrood, Holy Cross, Holy Door. Welcome to one and all.
Gracias. So, as noted, we are here for a primary candidates forum. Adriano Espalillat is the incumbent, with Darializa, Avila, Chevalier, and Oscar Romero as challengers in the Democratic primary for New York 13's district, which includes Washington Heights, Inwood, Harlem, and neighborhoods of the Bronx. While Election Day is on June 23rd, early voting has been underway across the district and will continue until June 21st. Though the three announced candidates had previously confirmed their attendance at today's forum, Congressman Espalillat's team communicated last night that scheduling conflicts would not permit him to participate. Theo, Chino, Tavarez had also presented a scheduling conflict prior. We will proceed as planned with our forum with Ms. Avila Chevalier and Mr. Romero. Bienvenidos de nuevo a todas y todos. Por favor, un aplauso para los candidatos. That the forum is here at Holyrood Episcopal Church, La Iglesia Santa Cruz, is a deliberate choice. The venue is a familiar one to many in the community, where both followers of worship and organizing movements have gathered for decades. We are grateful to our hosts here for their generosity tonight and on so many other occasions in opening their doors. We are reminded that we are in a space wherein we actively practice respect and dignity for each other. Aquí somos todos vecinos. I'm going to invite Karina Abar Jacobs to present a grounding exercise as a framing a tool for this evening.
Thank you. Buenas noches. Good evening. No se escucha. Buenas noches. ¿Cómo se sienten? Eso. Así, vamos arriba. How are you feeling today? Okay, de nuevo, I don't hear from this side. How are you feeling? Wonderful, okay. I am Karina Ibar Jacobs, a member of the community since 2005, fulfilling many roles, but I'm here in the capacity as part of the Dominican Women's Coalition, and I will be conducting an exercise because remember, this is community. And we want to lead in the spirit of community, leading by example and acknowledging the dignity of each person that is here today and who's not here today as well, right? So first, I would like to invite you to rise in body or spirit if you're not able to. And I want you to take a deep breath with me In through your nose. Vamos a respirar inhalando, expandiendo su vientre. Y luego hold it. And exhale, exhalar con un Otra vez. Inhalando, let's inhale through your nose, expanding your belly. Hold it. Y luego exhale con una And now I will invite you to look at the person right next to you, acknowledge them, and say, it is good to be in your presence. It is good to be in your presence. Mire a la persona a su lado y diga, me alegra estar en tu presencia. Okay. Okay. Now you may sit down. Se pueden sentar, por favor, y muchísimas gracias. Okay, ¿estamos listas y listos? Como buena organizadora comunitaria y como esto es el espíritu de la comunidad, queremos hacer acuerdos comunitarios. Van a haber desacuerdos, van a haber frustraciones y eso está muy bien. Vamos a traer la política de desacuerdo con dignidad a la humanidad del otro y a sí mismo, respetando nuestros valores y el respeto mutuo. Así que quisiera compartir unos acuerdos que he escrito. So let's start with some community agreements. On behalf of the planning committee of our sponsoring organizations, we welcome you to this community forum. On behalf of the Mami Chula Social Club, woo! On behalf of the National Dominican Women's Caucus, woo! And the Dominican Women's Coalition, we want to welcome you. Muy bienvenidos, right? So we want to establish a few community agreements that reflect our shared values. First, we recognize the inherent dignity and worth of every person in this room. We may come from different backgrounds, cultures, experiences, political perspectives, faith traditions, and life journeys, but everyone deserves to be treated with respect. Second, we ask that all participants engage in a spirit of curiosity, listening, and constructive dialogue. We encourage thoughtful questions and passionate participation, while remembering that disagreement does not require disrespect. Third, this is a welcoming space for all members of our community. We have zero, and I repeat, zero tolerance for racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, sexism, ableism, or any form of discrimination, intimidation, harassment, or hateful language directed toward any individual or group, candidate, or any of us here. Thank you. Fourth, we ask everyone to allow candidates, moderators, and fellow attendees that are speaking without interruption, please. We want every voice to be heard and every participant to feel safe and respected. Finally, we are here because we care about our community and our future. Community organizing teaches us that strong communities are built not only through advocacy, but also through mutual respect, shared responsibilities, and meaningful participation. So thank you for helping us create that space where everyone can engage with dignity and hopefully invite any of you in the audience to run for office in the future, right? So I owe it to you to read this in Spanish. Primero, reconocemos la dignidad inherente de cada persona. Venimos de diferentes culturas, experiencias, creencias, generaciones, identidades y perspectivas políticas. Y esa diversidad es una fortaleza de nuestra comunidad y merece ser honrada con respeto. Segundo, les invitamos a participar desde escuchar activamente desde la curiosidad y el diálogo constructivo. Podemos tener desacuerdos y opiniones distintas, pero nos comprometemos a tratarnos con respeto y humanidad en todo momento. Tercero, este es un espacio acogedor para toda la comunidad y tenemos, y repito, cero tolerancia hacia el racismo, la xenofobia, la islamofobia, el antisemitismo, la homofobia, la transfobia, el sexismo, el capitalismo o cualquier forma de discriminación, socialismo, intimidación, acoso o lenguaje de odio. Todas las personas tienen derecho a sentirse seguras y respetadas aquí. Cuarto, le pedimos que permitamos que cada participante, candidato, candidata, moderadora y miembro de la audiencia pueda expresarse sin interrupciones. Queremos que todas las voces tengan la oportunidad de ser escuchadas. También queremos liderar con ejemplo. En un momento en el que el discurso público puede volverse divisivo, queremos demostrar que es posible dialogar con respeto, escuchar con atención y participar cívicamente sin perder nuestra humanidad. La forma en que nos tratamos esta noche es tan importante como las ideas que compartimos. Esperamos que este sea uno de muchos espacios comunitarios donde todas y todos nos sintamos seguros para expresarnos, hacer preguntas, compartir experiencias y participar en las conversaciones que afectan nuestras vidas. Y quién sabe, quizás esta noche nos inspire a que uno de ustedes presente se postule a ser candidato para alguna candidatura en el futuro, quizás en el presente, quién sabe. Pero en sí queremos construir un espacio de dignidad y respeto. Muchísimas gracias y les dejo con nuestra talentosa y querida Debralee Santos.
Gracias. Gracias, Karina, muy amable. Queríamos que ese fuera parte de nuestra discusión desde el inicio para crear parámetros de respeto, para crear espacio para diálogo franco y también un espacio donde al final de esta discusión quedemos más informados, educados y hasta posiblemente entretenidos y saliendo en alegría y risa por haber estado este tiempo juntos. El préstamo de tiempo es el más valioso que hay. Eso no se puede devolver de ninguna otra manera. El hecho de que ustedes no han dado este tiempo con nosotros esta noche es una cosa imprescindible y le agradecemos sobremanera. Gracias por eso. Como hablamos anteriormente, es un foro bilingüe. Entendemos que la mayor parte de la conversación posiblemente se dé en inglés y como en realidad estamos hablando de un puesto donde el inglés es que domina, se le perdona a cualquiera que se preste más al inglés y lo entendemos. Si hay algo en el cual alguien necesita traducción, le pido que por favor espere hasta un momento debido, porque si no estaremos aquí hasta la medianoche. Y el Alto Manhattan está caliente, señores. Hasta la medianoche en una iglesia nadie quiere estar, creo yo. Así que me tiro hacia el inglés. De nuevo le digo, welcome to your community forum, sponsored again by the National Dominican Women's Caucus, the Dominican Women's Coalition, the Mami Chula Social Club, all independent, grassroots, nonpartisan, women-centered organizations who have worked tonight towards one goal, to create a space for robust and meaningful dialogue rooted primarily in the interests and concerns of this community. The questions have been submitted online in the days prior and have been compiled. We are also circulating cards on which audience members can submit additional questions we will try to get to if time permits. Finally, please keep in mind that no one forum can ask or answer all of the questions of the candidates. To be fair, we are seeking here to focus attention on some of the more pressing concerns raised by the community. And for an even fuller picture, we encourage you to seek out the candidates' speeches and online platforms, to look through their other debates and forums, to engage with them directly, and also to speak to your neighbors and friends. To our candidates, again, thank you for joining us this evening. Oscar Romero currently serves as a Chief Information Officer of the New York City Civic Engagement Commission. Darializa Avila Chevalier is an investigator at the Public Defender Legal Organization Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem. So what is this office that the candidates aspire to? In brief, Congress is one of 3 branches of the federal government, made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. Congress is the legislative branch whose members are elected to represent their constituents, create and vote on laws, oversee federal agencies, and help shape national policy. This forum is designed to promote civic understanding, encourage informed discussion, and provide an opportunity to learn more about the issues that affect our communities and our country. Format, simple. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer the questions asked. A follow-up question will grant each candidate a minute to respond. If a rebuttal is requested, 30 seconds will be granted to respond. Yes? Good? We're good? Here we go. I think you guys at this point have done this so many times. Ya están como veteranos en este tipo de discurso. Ya están pero nunca en un altar. Es la primera vez que lo ponemos en un altar, ¿verdad? ¿Vieron? ¡Ey! La primera vez que lo ponemos en altar. Así que el Alto Manhattan siempre se representa de una manera única, ¿verdad? Ok. Arranquemos entonces. We're going to ask you, Oscar. Define progressivism. Define your version of progressivism and how it applies and would benefit this community.
Yes, thank you so much for the question, and also thank you everybody for being here and for facilitating this conversation, and this forum is very important. Well, I believe in a couple of different things. Number one, I believe that the role of the state should be to redistribute wealth, that it should fundamentally be about ending poverty and inequality. That's better? Can you hear me? Okay, great. So that it should fundamentally be about ending poverty and inequality. That every state, every system, every place in the world that we look at is grounded on oppression, segregation, racism, and colonialism. So the state cannot be indifferent to that reality. We have to undo that legacy at the same time that we create the conditions for people to thrive. Now how? In the terms that they define. Those conditions ought to be participatory, ought to be open, ought to be the ones that allow to people to have the basic needs that they have to be met, whether it is access to universal health care, access to free higher education, access to job opportunities, to an environment free of racism and segregation. That is the kind of government that I want to see. Ultimately, a government that works for you, that solves your problems, that listens to you when you change your mind about complicated matters. One that puts the wealth that this nation has generated, that you have generated, to your service. And one that uses the money that we have to improve everybody's living conditions instead of going in foreign wars across the world, committing genocides, committing abuse, committing the taking of resources like it's happening in Venezuela, threatening poverty like they're doing in Cuba, and letting us be dragged in more inhumane and cruel wars across the world. That is the kind of government that I'm here to fight for with you.
Thank you. Darializa?
Bueno, I will start by telling you a little bit about how I came to my politics and who I am as a person. I am the daughter of Dominican immigrants. I am someone who grew up in childhood poverty, essentially. My dad was a truck driver. My mom was a caseworker, and she had to work multiple jobs, sometimes up to 3 jobs, to be able to pay the rent. We moved around a lot as a kid, between here and in Miami and Dominican Republic. At one point, my mom had to send me to Venezuela to be with my grandmother because she and my dad were trying to find work. And I grew up with that reality, a reality that so many people in this country and in this city have to go through to provide for their kids. We are the community that is often left behind by policies that continue to put profit over people. And so as I've gotten older, as I've grown, as I have been fortunate enough to have the education that I've received, I've grown into my politics, into a politics that I would define as democratic socialism, which to me is defined by a politic that centers working people and allows working people to benefit from the wealth that they produce in our society, so that we can actually benefit from all of the riches that we are the ones making for this society, and making sure that we're coming to decisions about how that wealth is used and distributed together in a democratic way. I am fighting fighting to represent this community because I really believe that this community deserves someone who will fight for them, who has been with them on the hardest days of their lives, who understands what it feels like to not know whether you'll be able to pay the rent at the end of the month because things are getting so much harder. And I'm someone who is fighting to make sure that we all have dignified housing, that we have housing for all, that our tax dollars come back to our communities because those are tax dollars that we worked so hard for. They should come back to our communities to actually address the issue of childhood poverty that we have here, where 40% of our kids are living through the indignity of that poverty. Making sure that instead of going towards these foreign and endless wars that are slaughtering communities abroad, that those resources can fund our schools, can allow us to expand the child tax credit, and to make sure that we are abolishing ICE because our community deserves to breathe.
Thank you. Every candidate talks about fighting for their community. Leadership, though, is not something you can claim, it is something the community grants. What have you built, Oscar, comenzando contigo? What have you built, sacrificed, or contributed specifically to New York's District 13 that demonstrates your readiness to represent this district in Congress? Why should residents trust you with the future of this district?
You know, in life, there's experiences you wish you never had. And there's experiences that unfortunately way too many of us share. Unfortunately, when I see the stories, when I support people applying through their asylum cases, and I see the stories of how they were extortioned, how their families were assaulted, I see the story of my own family. My family survived the US war on drugs in Mexico. My dad is one of the more than 200,000 forced disappearances in Mexico. The case was never resolved. That effectively meant not only the incredible pain of being a kid with no time to mourn for those that you have lost because you have to worry about how to put food on the table for those that you still have. It meant that I had to prioritize the safety of my family as we were being evicted over justice, because there was somebody out there trying to get us out of a house, and I couldn't risk it. It meant that I had to figure out how to provide for my family. And the way that happened to me was through technical knowledge. I was able to break with poverty cycles through that. I became a public servant about 8 years ago. Here, I started in Inglewood and Washington Heights. And my job was to build community coalitions to solve local challenges with Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, Equal Community Services, City College, tenant organizers. And I was working to support the very families that share those stories, that will tell me how they struggled because they were gonna be evicted and how to prevent that. We did that here 8 years ago. I work on child protection services when we were in the middle of the pandemic and groomers were trying to attack kids online. I provided broadband services for people. I worked on waste management services in NYCHA and many more projects, more than 75 projects across the city that happened here in the Heights that you can find. What you have with me is a track record that is published, that is available, that you can judge to see the work that I have done for the community, and that speaks about the work that I can do for you.
Thank you. Darializa?
Hi. So I have been organizing in this community for over 14 years, and over that time, I have done work around a number of issues, including ending mass incarceration, fighting for immigration justice, and fighting to make sure that our tax dollars aren't going towards an apartheid and genocidal system against Palestinians. And so I have organized with Black Youth Project 100 to end police violence against our communities, building mutual aid projects that allowed for folks to actually receive financial support when they were left out of the stimulus program during the pandemic. I've campaigned to end permanent exclusion for folks within NYCHA who had been excluded from NYCHA residences. I worked with Families for Freedom, an organization that supports immigrant families who are facing deportation, and I've successfully reunited multiple families through that work. I've fought to connect people who could not reach their families families because their families didn't know what detention centers they had been sent to across the country, and fighting for just immigration policy through a lot of that work. Through my Palestine organizing, I have fought to end the genocide. I have built community across the city with folks who were fighting to make sure that their representatives, including our current representative, Espalillat, would actually sign on to the Block the Bombs bill. He has yet to do so, unfortunately. And I fought with my union, UAW, United Auto Workers, because to me, labor justice is also so integral to all of these issues that we're talking about. It is one of the largest unions in this area, and I'm so deeply proud to be a union member. For me, my organizing has always been around making sure that we are centering human dignity in every aspect of our society. And over the years, I've just learned so much about how to be able to come together and bring people together through that. And this campaign, in many ways for me, is just that. It's organizing. It's a vehicle for bringing people into their own politics, into the process of governing. And I'm so deeply grateful to every member of our coalition for their role in that.
Thank you. Can you speak to how that specific experience you would bring to the table? What were some of the concrete specific actions that you see as different from what exists now?
Absolutely. You know, I think part of what I'm very proud to have done through this campaign is build a large coalition of organizations, both grassroots organizations locally, both grassroots organizations locally, but also nationally, that really share a vision for what government should be for working people. And through that process, using it as a vehicle so that people can come into their own politics, they can find their organizing home and be part of this process long past Election Day. To me, it's deeply important that people be engaged in the very politics that has an impact on their day-to-day lives. We cannot allow ourselves to just send someone into an ivory tower with a smoke screen and trust that what they're doing is going to be in our best interest. We have to make sure that government is something that we all do together. And so, you know, when I was asked to run, the first thing I said was, the condition is that we build the organizing infrastructure for people to be brought into this work. This is not, to me, about this seat. This is not about this race. This is about building movement that people can feel empowered by. Because for too long, we have had a politics of cynicism that has disempowered people from being part of their government. For me, this is about doing the reverse. It's about building a politics of hope, building a politics of empowerment, and building a politics of life.
Thank you. Oscar? Again, just a refresh, given the experiences that you just detailed, how would you bring them to bear in a governing space?
Well, I already work in government. I work in the New York City Civic Engagement Commission, running the largest participatory budgeting program in the history of New York City, with hundreds of community-based organizations in 12 languages, and actually gathering and engaging with more than 500,000 New Yorkers. I am already doing the work. This is not only about talking to community-based organizations and talking to people about what are the problems, it's also about knowing what are the organizations, the government agencies in the city, in the state, that actually touch people's lives, and what are the problems that they have. What is a problem that that person that will be your first point of contact in NYCHA is going to have? What is the thing that they're going to tell you? What happens when you're a small business asking for a loan and you go to SBS? What happens when you have an immigrant problem and you go to the Office of Immigrant Affairs just to discover that they don't have enough people? What happens when you see the translations that don't work? That is the kind of experience that I can bring. There's a lot of legislation in the city, in the state, and in the federal government that was made by people that didn't know how government works. Legislation that mandated that we have to have reports. Think, for example, about the city racial justice plan. You know, by the time that we were supposed to publish it, they were barely hiring people because they just didn't know how long it takes to hire people in government. Turns out that having experience building projects, creating solutions, documenting that, being able to say this is how we spend your money in a way that is effective, that matters. So I want to bring that to Washington. Not only the networks that brings me in government agencies, but also the connections that you get with people. You can get a lot of aspirations, but trust you have to earn with the work that you do with the communities that you serve.
Thank you. Darializa, you wanted to respond?
I also want to add that, you know, in the process of governing, there is an inherent trust that you have to build with the community. There's also an inherent trust you have to build with the team that you build when you go in. It is not one person that is governing. It is a team of people, whether that is the team that is providing constituent services, whether that is the team that is helping you with drafting legislation, or the team that is building the field operation to actually be able to take in the input from the community to have that reflected in the halls of power. This is a team effort, and this is something that I have always been doing as an organizer. That is the role of an organizer. And as an organizer, I am also very used to being out-resourced, being outnumbered, and still having an outsized impact on the systems that we're facing. I am someone who uses every lever at my disposal to make sure that we are delivering for our communities. That is the benefit of sending an organizer to Congress. We do not take no for an answer, and we will throw everything at the wall until we get it for our community.
Thank you. Oscar, you had wanted to respond. Please.
I think one of the challenges is that we just don't have room to fail. When you are working in government and you are working in government services, if you make a plan that you cannot deliver, somebody suffers. This was said by one of the deputy commissioners of the United Nations. Everybody should have, at the very least, the human right to be protected from public servants' incompetence. And I wholeheartedly believe that. A congressional office does not have the resources to do the constituent services, let me say that clearly, that this district needs. We work in an office in the Civic Engagement Commission that has more than 30 staff members, that partners with more than 100 nonprofits, that has a budget just to do that, just to do constituent services, just to talk to people about problems. And we don't have enough. So what we need to do as a congressional candidate is find the connections that we can make with all the government agencies whose job is to do that. Connect the dots. Why are we having people tell us the same problems over and over and over? So making those connections, not only with the agencies that actually do constituent services, that have a lot of outreach in the different places, which I know. You will not be surprised to know that that is NYCHA. You will not be surprised to know that the DOE has a lot of folks that are talking to parents all the time. You will not be surprised to know that DSNY has the largest fleet of people walking the streets. Do you talk to the sanitation workers? You know who knows what are people protesting about? Who knows the best data sense of what are people saying on the streets? It is not the government agencies that are supposed to create policy. It is the police department, because those are the ones that do the permits for protest. So, you know, there's a lot of information, a lot of pipelines that we need to connect to make sure that Congress can actually govern with people. And that is one of the things that, unfortunately, Congressman Espalillat has failed to achieve. He's been here for 9 years. He had the chance to connect those constituent services and solve the problems that our communities experience.
Thank you. Hagamos un cambio también a preguntarle algo en español. Estamos cómodos con contestar en español, ¿bien? Ok. Temas sobre los retos en la comunidad. ¿Me oyen? Bien, pero hay como una... Perdón. May I steal yours for a second? Vamos a ver, ¿ahora mejor? Ok. Los retos de la comunidad son abundantes. Hablamos de retos de la salud mental, falta de vivienda asequible, cuidado infantil, sobra la discusión. En la opinión de cada candidato, le pido que aclaren qué piensan es el mayor reto de la comunidad y cuál es el plan que tienen para resolverlo, para que en un año, cuando ya estén elegidos, puedan decir, esto logré hacer. Comencemos con Darializa, que creo que fue la primera. Por favor.
Bueno, para mí son 3 y la razón por cual tenemos una plataforma de 3 cosas es porque cuando yo pasé casi un año tocando puertas por el alcalde, Sonam Mamdani, estas son las cosas que la gente me decía en la puerta y son las cosas por cual yo también estaba viviendo. La primera es la vivienda asequible. Y necesitamos viviendas para todos, dignas. Necesitamos asegurarnos que estamos invirtiendo en NYCHA porque demasiados de nuestros vecinos están viviendo bajo condiciones con poca dignidad, y eso es un fallo de nuestras instituciones gubernamentales. Necesitamos también asegurarnos que nosotros estamos protegiendo a los inquilinos en contra de los propietarios que están abusando de ellos. Y tenemos también que asegurarnos que tengamos camino hacia poder ser dueños de nuestro propio hogar, porque ahora mismo el 88% de este distrito somos inquilinos. La segunda cosa es que ahora mismo nuestros impuestos se usan para bombardear a comunidades en el extranjero. Cuando tenemos un problema aquí de la pobreza infantil que es tan perversiva que 40% de nuestros niños están sufriendo por esa indignidad. Y necesitamos asegurarnos que estamos erradicando la pobreza infantil con, por ejemplo, expandiendo el crédito de impuestos, el crédito de los niños para que los padres tengan $800 por cada niño para poder ayudarlos con la renta, con el alimento, con lo que sea. Y también necesitamos asegurarnos que estamos protegiendo a nuestra comunidad inmigrante, porque tenemos que abolir a ICE y tenemos que usar esos recursos para asegurar caminos hacia la ciudadanía. No hay razón por cual tenemos que tener una institución como ICE que no está basada en el racismo. Tenemos que abolir con esa institución y asegurarnos que tengamos un sistema que valore la dignidad de nuestra comunidad inmigrante.
Bueno, aquí hay una diferencia interesante de la forma en la que nos aproximamos a hacer estas políticas. Yo, a diferencia de la candidata, tengo 14 políticas públicas que he delineado, porque a lo largo de estos 8 años, pues son muchos los problemas. Desde cómo construimos oportunidades laborales, cómo mejoramos las condiciones de vivienda. No es lo mismo gestionar las condiciones de NYCHA que gestionar departamentos regularizados. No es lo mismo construir infraestructura para, por ejemplo, atender temas de cambio climático y de inundaciones que desarrollar ancho de banda. Muchos problemas que todos están conectados. Y si tuviera que resumirlo, diría que la raíz de todo esto es la segregación y la violencia racista que está detrás del diseño de políticas públicas en nuestro país. Y nuestro distrito lo carga. Nuestro distrito lo carga. Harlem tiene toda la violencia de la segregación racial. East Harlem lo ves, las calles que fueron hechas para atravesarte, no para servirte, los lugares que fueron hechos para contaminarte, las escuelas con peor infraestructura donde tienes detectores de metales, mientras que en el otro lado de la 96 tienes sillones de diseñador. Entonces, hay que hablar de todo esto, porque esto genera varias cosas. Genera desposesión de la riqueza generacional. Genera que la mayor cantidad de los latinos y la comunidad afroamericana no tenga trabajos en las zonas más productivas. Representamos el 44% de la población en edad de trabajar y aún así el 9% de los desarrolladores en la industria de tecnología. Pero en la industria de construcción representamos más, en la de trabajar en la cocina representamos más. Eso es segregación y racismo. Cuando vas a los doctores no representan, no se ven como nosotros. ¿Por qué? Porque ir a la escuela es imposible, es caro. ¿Qué carreras son caras? Las ingenierías, la escuela de medicina, las especialidades, los abogados. ¿Por qué? Porque está hecho para mantenernos en la pobreza. Entonces, ¿qué hay que hacer? Hay que atender esas oportunidades, hay que hacer salud pública para que no nos moramos por las consecuencias de la desigualdad, hay que hacer educación pública y hay que mejorar las condiciones de vivienda. Esa es la agenda que propongo.
Gracias. Solo quiero reiterar, en el caso de ambos, ¿qué acción concreta podrían ustedes describir que pondrían hacia adelante para, dentro del tiempo de un año de su elección, podrán decir, eso lo logré? Continúo con Darializa, por favor. En un acto específico, concreto, que pueda ayudar con el problema que acabas de identificar.
Vamos a bloquear las bombas que están cayendo bajo la comunidad palestina en Irán. Vamos a quitarle el dinero que tenemos ahora en la maquinaria de guerra y reinvertir ese dinero y esos impuestos en nuestra comunidad y expandir el crédito de niños que ha ayudado a tantas familias reducir la pobreza infantil.
Gracias. Oscar.
Bueno, son dos agendas. Por un lado, apoyar la legislación que ya existe de sentido común. Salud pública, ya existe la legislación, hay que apoyarla. Educación pública, ya existen los planes. No se han hecho muchos de ellos en legislación, pero ya existen. Por ejemplo, planes como en la administración de Biden de $56 billones para proveer salud pública a cualquier familia con menos de $185,000 al año de ingresos. Creo que además tenemos que meter estas leyes y ser más ambiciosos. Los demócratas han fallado en eso. Muchos de estos derechos no son universales. Ellos hacen means testing y dicen, bueno, vamos a hacer un límite para que después, cuando lleguen los republicanos, tomen ese límite y lo hagan más bajo. Y así es como perdemos los créditos, por ejemplo, para los niños de los que está hablando la candidata Darializa. Y así es como perdemos el acceso a los food stamps. Y así es como perdemos el tipo de seguro médico. Entonces, derechos universales. Hay que cambiar el diálogo sobre derechos universales. Y la siguiente parte, hay que introducir legislación donde podamos conseguir el apoyo del otro lado, de los republicanos, de los que no piensan igual que nosotros, porque a ellos también los matan las aseguradoras, porque a ellos también les duelen sus hijos cuando se mueren en una inundación, porque a ellos también les pesa tener que pagar más por los hidrocarburos que las guerras causan. Entonces, dejar de hacer estas financiamiento de guerras en el extranjero, controlar la inflación y encontrar la manera de dialogar con esos que no dicen las mismas palabras, pero que sufren las mismas consecuencias. Al final, el 99% de nosotros somos explotados por los millonarios y los billonarios que no pagan nada.
Apuntado están porque ambos estarán en la misma conversación dentro de un año para ver la prueba, ¿no? Veremos qué ha sucedido dentro del año y pico. Let's switch back now to English. Affordability is scarce across the city, but especially in our district, where working families are struggling with rising rents, reductions in housing assistance, and deteriorating public housing conditions. Let's speak specifically to what the federal government can do and how you will compel it differently than it has been compelled to specifically protect tenants. Oscar.
Bueno, son varias agendas, de nuevo. La primera parte, hay que decirlo claro porque muchas personas no lo dicen. Oh, so sorry, thank you. I'm so sorry, I went crazy. Can I get the 2 minutes again in English? Over there?
Yeah, you can restart. No.
Yeah, I can restart. Can I get the 2 minutes in English again? Yeah. Just sorry, y'all, I got excited.
Ahorita lo haremos en mandarín.
Okay, let's do this. So, it is, so first of all, we actually have to say it clearly because many people in Congress wouldn't say this. We have to protect Section 9. We have to invest in NYCHA. We have to get the funding back to NYCHA so that we can actually keep public housing public. We also have to audit Section 8 in a couple of different ways. First, you can see the reports from the previous controller, Brad Lander, around the rates of evictions across the NYCHA housing developments that have moved to the RAD and the PACT. That is a problem. We need to review that. Then the next thing that we can do that is very concrete is we have to improve the funding that we do for NYCHA for electrification. That changes the quality condition of the people living in NYCHA. Legislation that is doing that, for example, is the Green New Deal for public housing. Now, another challenge that we have around housing is building more affordable housing, of course. And protecting tenants' rights is about enforcement. There's a lot of people that get vouchers, Section 8 vouchers, that are abused. There's a lot of the income discrimination that happens across the city. You have about 233,000 people on Section 8 vouchers. 100,000 of those are in NYCHA, but the rest are managed by HPD. So we need to increase the funding that goes to HPD to be sure that those Section 8 vouchers are being used the right way and the landlords are not abusing them, but also on the other hand, the landlords are getting paid on time. So that is about the specific funding in HPD. And lastly, we have to prevent unlawful evictions. We have to make sure everybody knows their tenant rights. We have to do a lot of education in tenant court, so that people in housing court, so that people know what they can and cannot do in housing court. And lastly, we have to make that bilingual for this district, and we certainly need to probably do it in more than 3 languages, 4 languages at this point in this district. Thank you.
Well, first of all, so glad to hear that there is a changing of positions on a number of these issues from my opponent, but I have been very clear from the very beginning that we need to protect NYCHA residents, and we do that by fighting for a Green New Deal for public housing. I'm actually so deeply grateful to actually to my campaign manager, Ilona Dubrhe, who was actually one of the architects of the Green New Deal for public housing, who is someone who has been advocating for this for many, many years. And we have said from the very beginning, we need this Green New Deal for public housing for many reasons. We owe it to NYCHA residents that they have a dignified place to live. We need to fight for the $78 billion that are necessary to create this dignified housing, and we need to do it in a way that will also create dignified union work for the many people who need a pathway to the middle class. And it's essential that we do this in a form that decarbonizes NYCHA, because that will decrease the asthma rates and increase the health outcomes of so many people in our city. The impact, the economic impact of a Green New Deal for public housing would be 300,000 new union jobs for people across the city over the course of 10 years. It will be $96 billion that our city will benefit from over the course of 10 years. We also need to acknowledge that NYCHA tenants are currently the only tenants across the country that have the federally protected right to organize. And every tenant in this city and across the country should have that right, which is why it's so deeply important that we also sign on to the Tenants' Right to Organize Act, something that we did not have that our current congressman did not sponsor until we called him out on it in a debate. And so we need to make sure that we are fighting for tenants across the city. We need to also be creating pathways to homeownership, because again, 88% of us are renters, and we want to make sure that we are not subject to bad landlords and that our children can actually inherit the homes that they grew up in. And we do that by expanding community land trusts and HDFCs and really investing in communities and the pathways to this homeownership.
Oscar, did you want to respond to the...
First, just a clarifying question. What is exactly that you're talking about I changed my position on?
If I recall correctly, previously you were in favor of the PAC program, which privatizes a lot of NYCHA. This is the first I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first I'm hearing that you've advocated for the Green New Deal for public housing. And I think it's great that you are, because we need it. Those are things that we need. But I would just like to acknowledge that that is a position that we have held from the very beginning, and I'm very proud that if nothing else, we have pushed the current congressman to sign on a lot of the legislation that is absent. Can I finish my answer to it?
The question was, what was the clarifying point? Now you're talking about your position with the congressman, which is not an answer to my question.
And I was finishing my answer.
I think... Please.
So this is the beautiful thing about the internet. Everything is already there. So you can see what my positions were from day one. You can see that there. You can just Google it and find it. The next thing that I have to say is also, one of the funny things that campaigns do is they don't share their endorsement questionnaires. So you can see all the endorsement questionnaires of my campaign, and those are public, those I share, the one that we sent to the Working Families Party, the one that we sent to the SA, so you can see all my positions in housing, look at them, this is false. And I think, one of the challenges that I have personal experience in this race is just the willingness of candidates to engage in misinformation. I will leave it at that. What I will say about housing is that I actually work in NYCHA. I actually work protecting tenants' rights in this district. We develop census programs, and we deploy those census programs across the buildings in the Heights with the Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation and Inwood Community Services to prevent people from actually experiencing violations of the heat law, for example. We actually propose support and policy recommendations that you can also Google and find online, where we advocated for legislation to be passed so that no more fires will happen because people will have to use a fire heater, a heater in their apartments. In NYCHA, we work on the actual heat pumps and the cool pumps so that people could actually get an air conditioning that was reducing the emissions of NYCHA, which was the largest emissions of gases in the city from the building portfolio. And we also work on the infrastructure and electrification that the candidate is talking about, and created actual ovens that can that can actually manage to work within the conditions of a specific NYCHA buildings. We did the same around composting. We work in the topics that she's talking about.
Time. Thank you. To round us out, and I appreciate that there was clarification that was offered, I want to move to another facet of the affordable housing conversation. How would you, Darializa, balance the new development needs against that, preventing the displacement of long-term residents? How do you strike that balance, again, in a way that differentiates yourself from the incumbent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so often what we see, even if we just look around, right, we see new developments that are being built in our community that have very little community input as to what actually are the needs, where we have new buildings being built where the max number of bedrooms is 2 bedrooms. It's not using union labor, right? So our community isn't actually even benefiting from the work that is being produced here. And it often is also displacing people in the surrounding neighborhood because the cost of living then rises. And so when you look, what we end up having is a 2-bedroom that costs $4,000 in a community like Washington Heights, where the average median income in this district is $57,000 a year. That is not affordable. That is not affordable to anyone in this district. And what it does is that it displaces people from the community, but it also, it takes away the character of the community. It is deeply important to me that we are preserving the culture of our community as well. Yes, we need to build more housing, but we need to do it in a way that maintains the dignity, the character, and the culture of the community that is here. And we do that by making sure that any new building that is developed, that it is developed with the input of the community needs in mind.
Oscar.
There's a lot of legislation, for example, to try to increase what is understood to be the average median income, and that is used to calculate what is affordable, quote unquote, housing. That is broken. Affordable housing is just not affordable. We have a lot of loopholes that allow developers to reap the benefits of affordable housing and keep those spaces vacant, or create shady systems through which they actually don't get the tenants the housing that they promised the city they were going to give. We also have to rein on bad landlords, like, for example, Columbia University in Harlem, that have been a landlord that has closed the gates, that has been driving the process of like the purchasing and gentrification of the district. And that is a challenge. And we have to, and it is not only Columbia, right? This is the playbook of the real estate developers. First, they segregate you. They create poverty and inequality to make their portfolios outside those districts more expensive and to lower the price of yours. And the second thing they do is they dispossess you. They buy them away from you. They accumulate it, and then they go to the later stage when then they displace you. And that has serious consequences for people. One of those, we lose political power. Because when people are displaced, representation goes away. That's a problem. So we have to invest on affordable housing, but we also have to know the history of our own affordable housing programs. For example, there were programs in Harlem that would allow people to buy homes below market rate. Teachers, for example. Now, what happened with those programs? Well, many of these teachers were not able to pay the property taxes because the next administrations kept on increasing the property taxes. Then they became on default, and then they had to sell their houses at a lower market price that they had worked so far to achieve, and then ultimately they got displaced. So how do we connect the policies that we want, the kind of affordable housing we want to be built, with a concrete understanding of what are the loopholes that currently exist and the history of the policies that the city had implemented before?
Can I ask you both, de la manera más clara y más breve posible, y sé que es difícil, que de manera breve de nuevo, traten de destilar lo que acaban de explicar en español. ¿Cuál sería la póliza que más acudirían cada uno de ustedes para prevenir lo que es el desplazamiento de los inquilinos en nuestro distrito y aparte poder apoyar lo que es la creación de vivienda asequible nueva? Le pido que por favor de manera, porque es tan importante que no quiero que nadie quede fuera, por favor.
Sí, bueno, lo que vemos ahora es que cuando hay construcción nueva, la comunidad no se consulta. Entonces, parte del problema es que se construye edificios donde la renta se considera asequible $4,000 al mes. Eso no es asequible para nada en nuestra comunidad. Entonces, tenemos que asegurarnos que cuando haya nueva construcción, que estemos tomando la consideración de las necesidades de la comunidad, hablando directamente con la comunidad. Porque sí, se tiene que construir edificios nuevos para asegurarnos que haya suficientes edificios y apartamentos para todos los que viven aquí. Pero tenemos que tomar en cuenta el impacto que tienen los vecinos. Cuando se aumenta la renta a $4,000, eso le está aumentando la renta a todo el que está alrededor. Y también le está quitando la cultura y el carácter de ese vecindario. Tenemos que mantener esa dignidad que tiene la comunidad, porque esta comunidad no se vende. No podemos dejar que los propietarios vengan y construyan cosas que le van a enriquecer, le va a aumentar las riquezas a ellos. Pero a nosotros nos quedamos desemplazados. Tenemos que tomar las necesidades de la comunidad en cada consideración que se hace sobre dónde se va a construir en esta ciudad.
Gracias. Oscar.
Bueno, son varias cosas. Sí, por supuesto que construir edificios nuevos, pero como lo dije, hay que cerrar los agujeros fiscales que ayudan a los desarrolladores a construir edificios que finalmente no tienen affordable housing, que no tienen vivienda asequible. La otra cosa es que hay que cambiar las leyes que determinan lo que es affordable housing y hacerlo que esté conectado con la realidad de la mayoría de las familias. El promedio de los ingresos familiares en este distrito son $57,000 al año. Eso significa que hay muchas más familias ganando mucho menos que eso. Entonces, lo que es vivienda asequible tiene que cambiar, la que se tiene que construir, tiene que hacerse conectada a la realidad de esas familias y tenemos que hacer que las desarrolladoras, las constructoras, de verdad pongan esos departamentos en el mercado para esas familias y que sí pase. Eso es parte del proceso legislativo. La siguiente parte es que hay que hacer que los grandes dueños de real estate se hagan responsables por sus procesos y que sean mejores vecinos, como Columbia University. No pueden nada más comprar todo lo que quieren, cerrar el acceso como ellos quieren, poner los precios para sus estudiantes como ellos quieren y no preguntarse, oye, y si voy a tener estudiantes que tienen un ingreso muchísimo más alto que las demás personas que viven aquí, ¿qué crees que van a hacer los supermercados? ¿Y qué crees que va a pasar con los tipos de servicios que ellos van a tener alrededor? Bueno, pues van a subir. Y eso tienen que considerarlo y tienen que hacérseles responsable. Y la última cosa es proteger los derechos de los inquilinos que viven en departamentos que ya están regularizados, para que no los saquen de su casa de manera ilegal, para que puedan quedarse, para que conozcan que si alguien más llega, pueden pasarle el derecho sobre ese lease, ese contrato a la siguiente generación. Esas son las cosas que tenemos que hacer de manera concreta. Y eso que ni siquiera hemos hablado de los pequeños negocios, que es otro tema importante.
Gracias. Hablando de temas importantes, hablemos de inmigración. Y de nuevo, solo como dice uno en inglés, disclaimer, le digo que tantos temas importantes queremos tocar acá y queremos dialogar de manera profunda, pero también tenemos que tomar en cuenta el tiempo. Así que, de nuevo, regresando al tema de la inmigración, el distrito es obviamente un distrito de inmigrantes. Ustedes ambos tienen raíces inmigrantes. Tenemos una agencia ICE federal que ha prometido muy recientemente, Tom Homan, el Border Czar, ha prometido que vendrán más agentes de ICE, mucho más de lo que hemos visto jamás en la ciudad de Nueva York. Ya tenemos una comunidad bastante preocupada, aterrorizada, dirían algunos, con la agencia y sus acciones. ¿Qué podría hablar cada uno de ustedes, que Darializa, comenzaré contigo, sobre qué pasos tomarás tú como congresista para detener las acciones de una agencia ICE dentro de esta comunidad?
Bueno, en el Congreso hay mucho que se puede hacer. Primero que todo, podemos abolir a ICE. Eso muchas veces tenemos que abolirlo. Muchas veces hay gente que hablan como que si es algo que es like a nice saying, pero es algo que concreto que se puede hacer en el Congreso, porque el Congreso fue el que creó ICE y el Congreso puede abolirlo. Y eso es lo más importante para asegurarnos que ya esta organización no exista. Tenemos también que asegurarnos que estamos trabajando con todo nivel de gobierno, el estatal, la ciudad, para asegurarnos que cuando Tom Homan quiera venir para Nueva York, que él sepa que él no está bienvenido. Y tenemos que asegurarnos que estamos protegiendo nuestra ciudad y las políticas de sanctuary en esta ciudad. Tenemos que también, muchas veces, cuando hablamos de cómo somos pasar reformación inmigratoria, estamos hablando de qué política se va a pasar. Pero el problema es que tenemos leyes actuales que tenemos que repelar, porque son esas leyes que le están haciendo tantos daños a nuestra comunidad. Y yo soy alguien que he estado organizando por años con familias detenidas por ICE y he sido exitosa en reunificar familias por ese sistema. Soy alguien que yo no he tenido poder político en este nivel y todavía he sido exitosa en ese tipo de trabajo. He ayudado en abogar por políticas que verdaderamente van a reformar este sistema. Y soy alguien que he estudiado estos sistemas en un nivel académico para poder entender el impacto actual en las cortes, dentro de los centros de detención, en el impacto lo que tienen que enfrentar los abogados cuando están abogando por nuestras comunidades y cómo se pueden verdaderamente cambiar estas políticas para que nuestra comunidad pueda respirar.
Gracias, Oscar.
Sí, yo soy migrante. Yo me vine aquí para ayudar a que mi familia pudiera tener un futuro mejor después de enfrentarme a todo este tipo de violencia en México. Cuando hemos ayudado a personas que han sufrido por casos de asilo, los ayudamos con esa empatía de entender algo que quisiera que nadie tuviera que entender. Y parte de eso nos ayuda a ver todo el espacio donde hay margen legislativo. Por supuesto, es clarísimo, hay que abolir a ICE. Pero antes de ICE estaba la migra y había un montón de discriminación. Y muchos de los demócratas lo que hacen es que se afirman por contratos en los que ceden militarizar la frontera. Militarizan la frontera, ¿y eso qué significa? Significa que mandan a la gente a los caminos más peligrosos en el desierto donde se mueran y nadie los pueda contar. Eso es lo que está pasando. La siguiente cosa que tenemos que hacer es quitar la criminalización de reentrada a este país. Eso viene de una ley de 1930, eugenicista, racista, que se hizo para justificar la expulsión de los mexicanos en el 1930. Eso hay que abolirlo. La siguiente parte es garantizar due process. Tenemos que garantizar que la gente tiene un proceso judicial justo, donde los jueces no son determinados por el Poder Ejecutivo y donde ellos pueden escuchar sus asylum claims de manera segura dentro de los Estados Unidos. Tenemos que terminar las cárceles privadas, el masivo encarcelamiento de las personas que pone a 7 de cada 10 latinos y negros en la prisión en todo este país. 7 de cada 10, piensen eso. Es el mismo sistema de las mismas empresas que tienen a 70,000 migrantes, 50,000 de los cuales no han hecho nada. La otra cosa que tenemos que hacer es respuesta de emergencia para las familias a las cuales están enfrentando a eso ahora. Ese es el tipo de trabajo que estamos haciendo en mi campaña desde ya, reunificando familias, proveyendo servicios legales. Y finalmente, prevención. Hay mucho que se puede hacer si una familia aprende de qué tipo de información tiene que tener, cuáles son las cosas y los poderes que sus seres queridos tienen que tener también. Prevención, legislación y respuesta de emergencia.
Gracias. Girando de nuevo, y lo haré en ambos idiomas, el tema en el distrito contundente es eso de lo, como notaron, de eso de empresarios, emprendedores aquí en la ciudad, los negocios pequeños que han sido clave para el desarrollo económico de esta comunidad en particular. Se están desapareciendo. Sí, ese es el caso. Se sienten que están ahogándose, como dice uno, en una tacita de agua y no pueden echar hacia adelante, particularmente después de la pandemia. Necesitamos saber, y lo haré en ambos idiomas, Oscar, ¿de qué manera directa podrás tú ayudar a un negociante de pequeño negocio aquí en el distrito?
¿En inglés o en español?
Como desees tú, but I will just say that we're touching on the topic of small businesses that are obviously finding themselves, particularly in the post-pandemic space, completely underwater in many instances and finding it very difficult to make their rent, struggling to remain open, and finding very little resources or assistance. And my question is, what will you do about that particular problem in this district?
Okay, it's a couple of different places. Number one, we have to make sure that people have access to technical skills and support to found businesses. Many immigrant businesses found themselves on corporate or on structures that actually put them at risk of being sued and increase the taxes that they have to pay. So understanding, having legal services, having the way to organize your budget, having the resources and support to create your business, that's number one. That's the first thing that we have to do. The second thing, we have to provide access to low interest or no interest loans. That is very important. Businesses need that to start. We have to also create negotiations and conditions with landlords. We have to guarantee that if we are going to be doing new housing developments and new projects, that there are community spaces for local small businesses that can be successful. We can use the power of the state to actually do advertisement, to support them. You have La Marqueta as an example of this. We need to do that in places that are well connected, not only in the places that are underneath the trains, right? So there's already existing programming that talks about this. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to actually talk to them. If you talk to any small business, you talk to restaurants, they will tell you the challenges that they experience. It's not hard, they're not really hiding it from you. You know, you talk to them and you'll see that they get a lot of fines. The city fines a lot the small businesses. They get all these strict insurance companies that are going around increasing the prices every time, reducing the profit margins. We have to rein on insurance companies for small businesses. Then the next thing that we have to do is we actually have to create programs to bring youth to businesses, to local businesses. For example, whether it is building technical capacity to have them repair the cafe machines, whether it is actually programs like the one that they did in Brownsville, in Belmont Avenue, in front of the Brownsville Community Justice Center, where young people were learning everything about doing a restaurant as part of supporting local restaurants. And off they go to make their businesses. Businesses are part of the resources for people to generate generational wealth. We need to support them.
Thank you, Oscar. Darializa?
Well, I think I want to start off with talking about like what these businesses actually mean to our community. New York is made up of its small businesses. It is not New York without these businesses. And when you think about how so many of them really are the only lifeline for so many families, you start to have a deeper appreciation for what they do. Because when you go to the bodega and a mother just needs diapers and the bodega owner says, don't worry about it, pay me next week, you start to really appreciate the role that these small businesses have in this community. And we need to start supporting them in meaningful and tangible ways. I mean, there are a number of things that we can be doing, things like expanding acceleration funds so that folks can actually have the resources to open the small business to begin with. And especially for a lot of immigrant communities where if you are opening a business as a green card holder, you are right now not eligible for getting an SBA loan. And we need to change that. We need to make it so that immigrant business owners can actually access an SBA loan. And we need tax reform. We need tax reform so that small businesses aren't being taxed at the same rate as the corporations that are pricing them out. And we need to also talk about the landlords, because it's not just tenants who are being pushed out of the city by bad landlords, it is also these businesses. Every time the price of your takeout order or your groceries or what have you is going up, it's because their rent is going up. And we need to start talking seriously about a commercial rent freeze. We need to start seriously talking about how do we hold these bad landlords accountable, particularly when they make it so difficult to actually repair the conditions of the buildings that they're renting. And we need to have a much broader understanding, too, of how these social safety nets that we have cut under this government have an impact on these small businesses. We need to fight for the expansion of these social safety nets, but also fight for Medicare for all, so that small businesses don't hold the burden of having to pay for the insurance of their employees.
Thank you, Darializa. Oscar, I know you wanted to respond. In your response of 2 minutes, I'm going to ask you to also try and synthesize what you said previously en español, para también poder darle amplitud.
So can I respond first?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, just to the flow. So this is interesting. You know, I agree, we need tax reform. But here's again one of the places where experience matters. Businesses are not taxed in the same way that corporations. Let's say that. First of all, corporations, they get taxed on capital gains, and they do buybacks. And their CEOs often don't actually get they don't get to actually cash those shares that they hold of the corporations that get paid on shares, and then they go and live with loans. to further avoid paying taxes. So corporations actually manage to avoid significantly more taxes, and high-paid executives manage to avoid significantly more taxes than any small business owner, because small businesses are not traded. So that's a fundamental misunderstanding about the relationship that they do have. We, of course, need to do tax reform so that the small business actually have to pay less taxes. We have to actually provide loans. And now I'll go to translate the other thing in Spanish.
Por favor, de manera breve queremos que cada persona que esté aquí pueda captar lo que es parte de la plataforma que está difundiendo. Por favor.
Claro, claro. Bueno, a ver, hablar sobre los negocios.
Específicamente sobre los negocios y cómo mejor ayudar.
Exacto, ¿cómo mejorar los negocios? Bueno, lo primero que había dicho es, hay que hablar con los negocios, hay que hablar de cuáles son los problemas que ellos tienen. Uno de los problemas es que, para empezar, muchas de las personas que quieren empezar un nuevo negocio no tienen las habilidades, no conocen las estructuras legales en las cuales deberían incorporarse para no terminar teniendo legal liability o para no terminar pagando un montón de impuestos. Entonces, estructuras legales y préstamos sin intereses o con intereses muy bajos son fundamentales para nuevos emprendedores. La siguiente parte, los fines que la ciudad le pone a los negocios. Hay un acuerdo roto en donde la ciudad exige que los negocios se mantengan a estándares súper altos, pero cuando un negocio sale a la calle, les robaron la silla, les robaron las cosas, les pusieron basura que no es de ellos, y la ciudad, bien gracias, ¿dónde está? Entonces hay que asegurarnos que los estándares de lo que le ponemos a los negocios está a la par con lo de la ciudad.
Gracias. Es un poco injusto pedirle que hablemos lo mismo todos en español como en inglés. El tiempo no da, nunca. Perdón, Darializa, por
Voy
favor.
a tratar de ser breve,
Sí.
pero en inglés yo también empecé con enfocarnos del valor de estos negocios en nuestra comunidad, porque son los pequeños negocios que hacen Nueva York lo que es. Y el hecho de que tantas veces yo he entrado a estos pequeños negocios y veo que el dueño le dice a una madre que está tratando de comprar pañales, no te preocupes, me lo puedes pagar la semana que viene. Esto es lo que significa estos negocios a tanta familia en esta comunidad. Y tenemos que apoyarlos, tenemos que asegurarnos que estamos invirtiendo en los fondos de aceleración, acceleration funds, fondos de incubación, asegurándonos que le estamos dando acceso a dueños de negocios pequeños que tengan acceso a los préstamos SBA, asegurándonos que estamos haciendo la reforma de los impuestos para que los pequeños negocios no estén dando el mismo nivel de impuestos que tenga que pagar un corporatario como Amazon, que le está matando el negocio. Y cual ellos mismos no pagan, buscan mucha excusa para no pagar esos mismos impuestos. Y también tenemos que asegurarnos que los propietarios de estos edificios, porque no son solamente los inquilinos que están sacando de esta ciudad, son también los pequeños negocios, asegurándonos que estamos hablando de cómo congelar la renta para estos negocios. Y también finalmente pensar en una forma más expansiva de cómo los sistemas que nosotros necesitamos para que nuestra comunidad verdaderamente tenga los recursos que necesita, se puedan usar para ayudar a los pequeños negocios. Por ejemplo, con la salud, con un sistema universal de salud como Medicare for All, ya no tendría que los pequeños negocios pagar por la salud médica de sus empleados.
Gracias. Sabemos que lo que es el Congreso, tal como cuerpo legislativo, está bastante dividido. Las tensiones políticas están en alto. I'm going to switch back to English. So Congress is said to be deeply divided, and meaningful progress requires working with people who have different political views. If elected, you're heading into a Congress that is very deeply divided and will require of you to be successful, compromise, and reaching across the aisle. Can you speak to how you will do so without trading in on what are core values that you're presenting to the community as intrinsic to your platform? So, de nuevo reitero en breve, ¿cómo es posible trabajar en un Congreso con el nivel de compromiso que se requiere del back and forth, las decisiones que se tienen que tomar, sin ceder lo que es intrínsecamente, innatamente, el coro de la plataforma que presentan hoy en día a nuestra comunidad? Comencemos con Oscar, por favor.
Well, the first thing that we have to acknowledge is that electoral politics is broken. And the people in Congress often don't represent the people on the streets. How do you change that? You go talk to the people on the streets. So I will bring my experience working in actual participatory democracy and running citizen assemblies, where you bring people that actually disagree with each other, that have very diverse political views, and actually talk to them. If you, for example, want to change how a congressperson is thinking about something, you have to understand how their constituencies feel about those things, and find a language that may not be yours, but that resonates with them. Like I said before, folks in Texas may not see climate change the way we see it, but they care about their kids being drowned. Folks in Texas may not care about the sea rising levels, but when you talk to them about how, when the ports get flooded, the cost of oil is going to increase, they will care about the impact on their pocket. So finding the ways that you can talk to people to actually understand the challenges that they have and where they're coming from, to make sure that we can not make it about Democrats versus Republicans, and make it about us versus that 1% that is ripping us off every day. That is the point. That is the kind of change that we need to make. And for us to be able to do that, we cannot just simply say, this is what it is, you have to accept it. We have to find those common ground places, grounded on the people, not the elected officials. And then the pressure that you can build with the people is what is going to give you the cards to negotiate with the elected officials. Then you also have to find the narratives. We can rein on inflation. Most Republicans will agree with that. Apparently not Trump. Now he loves inflation, he says. But we can also agree on controlling the cost for the everyday resources that people consume. There's a lot of places where we can agree. Let's find those 2 out of the 10, agree on those 2, and continue the fight until we can get universal health care, free higher education, and affordable housing for all.
Thank you. Again, I want to make sure that we can focus in the response also on what you will not trade on. What you will not trade on.
So this is something that I think about every single day as an organizer. What is the line between my principle and my strategy? And the principle, to be very clear, is something that you will always stand by, even when it's hard, even when everything around you is telling you to betray it. That is what it means to have a principle. And for me, the principles of human dignity, of preserving human life, and the things that come with that, whether that is healthcare, whether that is housing, whether that is making sure that our resources actually come back to our communities instead of this endless war machine, those are at the core of my principles. And the reason that difference is important to understand from strategy is because that is where the compromise has to happen in order to win those things. We have to talk to people. We do that all the time as organizers. We have to meet people where they're at, understand where they're coming from, understand their perspectives, and understand where they're willing to meet us, so that we can actually make progress on the things that we want to deliver on. And that requires us to actually have conversations with people who we vehemently disagree with on a number of issues, and not compromising on those principles, but may be willing to have those conversations with people about, okay, you want to fund healthcare more? Let's talk about how we get more funding for nurses. Let's talk about how we get more funding for these sections of healthcare to build towards that stepping stone to get us to Medicare for all. Right? And so that is how organizers think about strategy. That is how we think about how do we move the conditions that are towards the conditions we want to see, and how do we bring people along in that journey. And that is something I'm constantly thinking about, both with the people I'm in direct negotiation with as an organizer, but also with the people I'm bringing into the negotiating room with me.
Thank you. That's good. Very short, 30 seconds to narrow into.
Yeah, it's a question, right? Because I think you're asking, how are we going to stay true to our principles once we're in Congress? And I think we have to stay true to those principles as we run campaigns. And I think one challenge, it is very easy to disagree with your enemies, but it takes a lot of experience to disagree with your friends when they want you to do the wrong thing. So my question for you is, if you don't believe that super PACs should exist, do you disavow the super PACs that spend their money on your campaign?
I have been very clear that, again, outside expenditure is not something I can control. I am very proud of the campaign that I have run, where we have raised over $1 million, where the average contribution is $66. And that is because people believe in the vision that we are fighting for. I've also been very clear from the very beginning that I will sign on to Congresswoman Summer Lee and Senator Bernie Sanders' bill to abolish super PACs. And that is my principle. Day one, you can expect to see my name on that bill.
So, I'm sorry, this conversation I know you've had in other forums, and so I want to make sure that we allow for space for others. So I think we're clear there. I think we can wrap that and button it up. I appreciate you raising it. Le exhorto a todos, les reitero, no todo se puede tocar aquí como tema. Si hay algo que, claro, tendremos un momento de preguntas para el pueblo, pero aparte también se han tocado estos temas en otro foro, debate, incluyendo uno, me imagino, que fue hoy en Telemundo, esta tarde que estará luego en televisión. Así que hay amplia fuente donde podemos también averiguar más. En el caso de hoy, para también comenzar a concluir, tensions are high, not just politically, in Congress in D.C., but in the district, right? This is an important race that will determine a number of important decisions for the residents and really for the community that is here and beyond these walls. What would you say to your most ardent opponent in asking them to reconsider your candidacy? What is your elevator pitch to the one person that you know has said to you, I cannot and will not support you? So I'm going to start with you, Oscar, and I'm going to ask for this to be 1 minute, because in an elevator, you got to be fast. So, 1 minuto, por favor. La pregunta fue para quien quisiera, ¿qué le diría como para convencer a la persona que más opone a tu candidatura? ¿Qué sería la manera en la cual tú podrías tratar de convencerle a esa persona que en sí la candidatura tuya es valiosa? Oscar, 1 minuto, por favor.
Hasta estas alturas, ustedes han tenido la oportunidad de escucharnos a todos, de ver en dónde estamos parados en nuestras políticas públicas, a pesar de que tenemos un sistema que está hecho para que gente como tú y yo nunca pudiera estar en una carrera electoral. La decisión finalmente es tuya. Todos ustedes son miembros de esta comunidad y creo que es importante que luchemos juntos por una democracia donde pueda haber más voces, donde no seamos nada más dos los que estamos aquí, donde seamos más representativos de todas las necesidades y los problemas que ustedes tienen. Mi campaña ha sido una que se ha basado en resolver problemas y ofrecerles una visión de la izquierda alternativa, calabada, anclada en resultados, en experiencia y en políticas, no en retórica. La decisión es tuya.
Gracias. Darializa.
I would simply ask that you consider the last 9 years. Has your life gotten better? And if it hasn't, then you should consider voting for somebody who will always fight for you, regardless of how you feel about me. Call me. Tell me how you feel about me. Tell me how you feel about that vote, because you deserve to be part of the process of governing. Tell me how your life can be made better. Because my experience as a renter in this district is that we need to make sure that we are fighting for dignified housing for all. My experience in this district is that we need to make sure that we are fighting to abolish ICE to protect our immigrant community. And my experience is one where the people of this district are sick and tired of watching their hard-earned money, their tax dollars, going towards bombing children abroad, while their own children here are suffering from hunger and housing insecurity. And you can always count on me to be someone to fight for the things that you deserve.
Thank you. We're going to be moving to questions from the public. We're just going to do a few lightning round questions that are just a few words para alegrar un poco el ánimo. Go to bodega order. Cuando vas a la bodega, ¿qué ordena?
Bacon and cheese.
Turkey, bacon, egg, and cheese. I don't eat pork, so.
Último libro que has leído.
Como agua para chocolate.
The Fire Next Time, James Baldwin.
Can you repeat that so people can hear you?
The Fire Next Time, James Baldwin.
Top artist on Spotify Rap last year?
I think it was Bad Bunny. Where is it?
I'm gonna go with that.
Very quickly, you know that part of your position in Congress would allow for some discretion about naming individual names or buildings. To whom would you grant that honor? Who would be the first person to whom you would say, I would like to name this for this person?
I will make that be a community conversation where the residents get to decide.
Similarly, but I think I have a few ideas in mind between Malcolm X, who has a lot, but Ella Baker, Minerva Mirabal, a lot of the folks who have really influenced the history of the culture of this community.
Best mayor in the city of New York?
Zohran Mamdani.
Best mayor? Okay. Y por último, should the Knicks visit the White House if invited?
Absolutely not.
Señores, el foro and you would put them through that? Why? They may get invited, so now we know where you stand on that. And I'm sorry, I lied. One last question. I know that we have spent a great deal of time in the conversation writ large outside of these walls speaking on international relations, something that is near and dear to those that are both residents of Puerto Rico and are very tied to that community either by a connection with family or themselves. De Puerto Rico, no se ha hablado mucho en esta campaña. Do you have a position on whether Puerto Rico should be, in fact, an independent state of its own or state, and how, in fact, it should be managed? Do you have an opinion, and what is it? Quickly.
Yes, Puerto Rico should actually decide what is the best for the Puerto Rican people. They have been a colonial holding of the United States for way too long, and the people of Puerto Rico deserve to have agency and choice.
Thank you. Darializa.
I also agree that the people of Puerto Rico should be able to decide and have that agency, and also we need to have a strong commitment that if the people of Puerto Rico choose independence, that we should honor that choice. And I think too often we leave it at just, well, let's let them decide and not follow up on that decision.
Thank you. Okay. We are going to now move to our community questions and ask for individuals ready to join us.
My name is Rafael Antonio Escano Quesada. My question very quickly, how can you explain that most of the people that have been, I'm talking about elected officials and also unions leaders who were supporting Mamdani during his campaign, and they're not supporting you today? How can you explain that? We're talking about elected officials, we're talking about union leaders, and you don't have that support. Why not?
That question is for Darializa.
I mean, I'm very proud of the coalition that I have built, which does include a union that I'm very proud to be a member of, UAW. I'm proud to have the support of Senator Robert Jackson. I'm proud to have the support of Senator Barry Briscoe, of Senator Kristen Gonzalez, of Senator Julia Salazar, of the Mayor, Zohran Mamdani. And I'm very proud of the coalition that I've built. I am a working person, and I will always fight for working people, and the working people of the city are at the center of my heart.
Thank you.
I didn't hear the beginning of the answer.
That's okay.
I didn't hear it because
La pregunta mía es, yo vivo en la 186, en la 185 y San Nicolás, en el 556. Mi hijo está en el LI. Yo estaba en el LI, pero me quitaron el Lando. Entonces, él quiere que yo introduzca una aplicación para subirme la renta. Y yo tengo como 17 años viviendo ahí. Yo nunca he vivido con renta controlada, nunca he vivido en housing, nunca he buscado ayuda, porque tengo 33 años en este país y lo he trabajado y reportado.
¿Cuál es la pregunta, señora?
La pregunta es que qué yo debo de hacer para que el Lando me ponga en el LI a mí.
I mean, first of all, I'm very happy to tell you that in the city now, perdóname, de nuevo. En la ciudad tenemos a una oficina para proteger los derechos de los inquilinos una vez más. La administración de Adams la había destruido, fue creada durante Di Blasio y ahora en la administración de Zohran Mamdani existe de nuevo. Entonces, ese es el primer lugar al que podrías ir para hablar sobre si hay o no hay alguna violación de tus derechos en ese contrato específico. Ellos deberían de poder ayudarte y orientarte en cómo ofrecerte ayuda legal. También existen servicios legales de manera gratuita. Si llamas el 311, ellos te van a decir cuáles son los servicios legales para temas de vivienda más actualizados, y hay tanto servicios gratuitos como abogados de bajo costo. Y lo importante es, no vayas a abogados que no conoces, porque hay muchos scammers allá afuera.
Gracias. Darializa.
Esa es la respuesta.
Bueno,
Llame el
si quiere
311.
agregar algo.
No, esa es la respuesta. Debe llamar al 311 para conseguir consejo de un abogado que confíe, y que también hay servicios en los niveles de la ciudad que le puede ayudar con eso también.
Gracias.
Hello, my name is Aisha Ogilvy. As the previous chair of Housing and Human Services, and also I served on the tech board under Oscar. Good to see you. So, as the previous chair of Housing and Human Services on Community Board 12 of Manhattan, I fought to expose malfeasance and misuse of public funds at the Fort Washington Armory on 168th Street here in our district. I exposed that the top 5 people were being paid over $1 million while excluding Black and brown children, while children from outside of our state were being bused here for the use of the building. Through my work, they expanded on serving more children from our community. However, my question to you is that space, as you spoke of, the fact that businesses, community organizations need access to space to do their business, yet there's a building that is there, that is written into the city contract as exactly that. And despite all of the fighting, 8 years, there are people here that fought along with me. And as a representative appointed 5 times, it took 8 years just to get a resolution passed. And even when it was passed, it was stonewalled. And still to this day, it's being stonewalled. What will you do to increase transparency, to make sure that there's accountability, to make sure that we are data-driven? I'm a forward deployed engineer, a data-driven community that understands the trends and what is happening here and who should be protected, supported, and what the city contracts are doing and what we are not doing to support the spirit of what we should be.
I'm going to ask
That's my
Darializa
question.
to take that first, since you answered the last one first.
Absolutely. I think that all starts from the top. If you have leadership that is, I think it all starts from the top. If you have leadership that is committed to transparency, to making sure that there is engagement with the community, right, that's going to follow then with the entire team, right? So making sure, for example, with data-driven services, right, making sure that that data is available to anyone who like goes to the office or goes to the representative, right? Making sure that's accessible and easy to find. And you know, I think what you're pointing to is also a level of opacity, a level of corruption, right, that has existed and has been, we've turned a blind eye to for far too long. Not as community members, because we're the ones impacted by it, but by our larger systems, right? And that needs to end. We deserve representation that's going to be transparent, that's actually going to commit to actually engaging with the community and bringing them into the process of civic literacy so that they know where to find this information and who to talk to. And, you know, it's not always going to be the person in the seat. Often it's going to be the person in their office who's helping them directly with these services, right? But those folks are following the leadership of the person in the seat.
Oscar?
I gotta say, this is such a special moment to me to see you today, because the moment that you applied to the Technology Community Board, which was the first thing I did in Inwood 8 years ago, was the first time my principles were tested. We received a phone call from Idanis Rodriguez, at the time he was a council member, yelling to my boss, saying, "Why did you invite organizers that have been fighting against us?" And my response to him was, because everybody is welcome. This is a participatory process and we're gonna have them all here. This is not a place for you to have just the people that you like and your friends. And just like that board was in that place, the Armory and any public asset, any building that we negotiated to have community spaces shouldn't be a place for all the friends of the elected officials to have a spot. That has to be said. These places need to have rotary systems where they openly, regularly, so that everybody has access and more opportunities provided, not only to those that happen to be close to the elected officials.
Thank you. Adelante.
Hi, I wanted to ask, I think it's very difficult to talk to a lot of our Congress people. They have satellite offices, but when you go, they're either empty or no one wants to talk to you. And I wanted to ask you both how you're gonna address how unusually large this district is, and how you'll be able to actually reach the individuals who want to speak to you.
Talking to people is what I do for my job every day. And I gotta tell you, you're absolutely right. I work in the city government for 8 years. And every time we reach out, I reached out to elected officials to get them to help me fund programs, work on things that had already money, just for them to know what they were, for us to brief them. They were impossible to access. But you know what? Now that I'm running for office, I see a congressman every other week. And I see all the elected officials, all the council members of the state assembly, because you know what? They're going around to get votes. So one of the things is we need to completely flip that up. We need to make sure that we keep our elected officials accountable. If they don't do constituent services, if they don't talk to you, if they're not accessible, if they don't have a plan to do that at scale with the government agencies that do them, then we gotta boot them out. It's that simple.
Thank you.
You know, I have organized here for over 14 years. In the last 9 years of the representation that we've had, I have not been able to actually reach our congressman. And it wasn't until we launched this campaign, it wasn't actually until recent debates that we actually had a substantive conversation for the very first time. Working people should not have to run for office to hear from their representation. And the reality is that we actually live in the geographically smallest district in the country. So it's not like this man is running from half the middle of the state back to New York City, right? And like it is for so many other Congress people across the country. He is actually a train ride away, and based off of recent debates, he's a car ride away from his next office. Or a plane ride. But, you know, I think the real issue here is that we have what the office that is now does not have the staffing levels that it requires to actually meet the need, and does not have competent staff to actually address the issues that need to be addressed. You need someone who is managing constituent services, who understands how to operate within a crisis, who understands how to ask others to do work for them. Delegate, thank you, delegate work. It's been a long day. To delegate certain bodies of work to others, who is able to actually follow through on the commitments that are made to constituents, right? And to keep track of those commitments in an efficient way. That all has to do with, do you have leadership that is actually committed to hiring responsive and culturally competent staff?
Thank you. And just in the interest of trying to make sure we get through as many questions, we're just going to ask us to distill as much as possible across the board. Please.
Yeah, and keep the questions brief, please.
Hi, my name is Michael Hano. This is the 3rd Congressional Forum that I've attended. My question is for Darializa. At the first forum, which was at a church up in Inwood, when you introduced yourself, you mentioned that you had spent some time in New York with relatives. You had even lived in Dominican Republic for a little while when very young. You mostly grew up in Florida. Was that correct? And I know there's been some criticism leveled at some candidates who are not originally from New York. I don't think that's fair. I think if you came here and you've been here for a while, you can call yourself a New Yorker, and that's fine. Thank you. At the second forum that I attended on 155th Street, as a We Act for Change, when you introduced yourself, you finished up by saying that I've lived here my whole entire life. Now, no, you didn't say that. And I'm born and raised on 155th Street. My parents live in the same building 62 years on 155th. I stayed quiet, but I got to ask you to address that. Because you said, I've lived here my whole entire life. And for me, more than ideology or platform, we need people of exceptional character in elected office, people who will not say whatever they think is going to benefit them. And I ask you to address that.
Thank you.
If I misspoke in that moment, then I misspoke and I apologize, but I've been very clear. I've lived here my entire adult life. And I have said that time and time again.
Thank you.
Hello.
I want to thank you both for actually making it all the way uptown. Unfortunately, not everyone's in attendance today, but you guys made it out here. There was a lot of conversation around affordability and having livable conditions in housing, and both of you mentioned new developments and NYCHA, but unfortunately that makes up under 5% of District 13. 70% of our district falls within Section 26 to 150, I believe, which is rent stabilization. We recently suffered an immeasurable tragedy on Dykeman on a building that had a plethora of violations via HPD. What legislation do you both suggest that will hold HPD accountable that in essence affects 70% of our community? Because there's no premise to me having access to a rent stabilized apartment if it's literally falling on me. There's no.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna have Oscar start with.
You know, one of the things that I said is that we needed to actually support HPD to actually be able to review the violations around Section 8. So one of the other ways in which HPD is failing is by not having the staff to actually make sure that rent stabilization is maintained stable and that people are not tricked in all these illegal ways away from their leases and literally tortured so that they can leave those apartments so that landlords can just like refurbish them, sell them, and put them at market rate. So what that means is that we actually have to make sure that we have competent people in the HUD. We have to pass legislation to protect and expand the money that we put on Section 8. We have to pass legislation to protect and expand how those get to be enforced. We need to put more money on HPD. Now, the majority, I would say, of the challenges with this is that this is not funded by the federal government currently. It is funded by the city and the state. So we have to make sure that we do fund enforcement at the federal level of HPD.
Yeah,
This question is really one of enforcement, and it's one of accountability. When you have representatives who take hundreds of thousands of dollars from the very landlords that are making these conditions so unlivable, what then happens is that they turn a blind eye to these very violations, right? And so what we need is representation that is not going to turn that blind eye, to actually enforce these policies, work with every single level of government to make sure that these landlords are being held accountable, because they are violating current law every single day.
Thank you both for being here. One of the reasons why ICE agents have been able to operate with such minimal oversight is because there is no federal statute in place that allows individuals to sue federal agents if their constitutional rights have been violated by them. There is a statute, Section 1983, that allows individuals to sue specifically state and local officials for constitutional rights violations. Would you support expanding Section 1983 to include federal officials too? This would include ICE agents, DHS agents, FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, and federal prison guards.
Yes, absolutely. I think that needs to be expanded. And I also think at the root of the problem is that we have ICE to begin with. But yes, especially with other law enforcement agencies, we need 1983 expanded.
Yes, I think it should be expanded, but we also have to prosecute all the people. Okay, I think it should be expanded, but we also have to prosecute all the people who violated human rights. We have to make sure we prosecute the Trump's appointees that have been overseeing ICE, and also all those middle management that we don't hear about, that continue to violate human rights, that continue to organize them, that continue to radicalize people, and that are providing crazy amounts of funding for low-income communities for them to join ICE and then commit human rights violations. We need to prosecute them all.
Thank you. Next question, please.
We're going to continue for 5 more minutes, so the briefer you are, the more people get to go.
Hello, Adalia, right? I have a question for you. So, if you work with Zara Mandani, which you have good relationship with Zara Mandani. My name is Earl, okay? So, my issue is crime in America, right? Nobody hasn't talked about crime yet. So, how would you get Zara Mandani and you to lower down crime? Because we walk in the street every day, we want to feel safe. We don't want to be threatened, we don't want to be killed, we don't want to be agnostic or anything. How would you control that? How would you make us feel safe and welcome? Bring a better life, better future, and better population.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, I actually, in my doctoral research, what I look at is actually that, it's criminology, and I look at what actually are the systems that allow our communities to feel safer. Because we live in a time where we have the most militarized police force in the history of the world. We are spending more money on policing than we ever have, and yet we still feel deeply unsafe in our own communities. And what I've And what I found through both my own experience as an organizer and as somebody who has been studying this on a policy level is that the things that actually bring us safety are investing in our social safety nets, investing in our schools, investing in after-school programs for our kids so that they have somewhere to go that is safe, that their parents know where they are. It's making sure that we're providing the resources for folks to actually have a dignified place to lay their head at night so that they're not sleep on the trains or on the street. It's making sure that we are funding the wraparound services that people who are suffering from substance use can actually, transition out of that, and the mental health support that they need to be able to lead a dignified life.
Thank you, Oscar.
Well, here's one of the places where I didn't read about it. The scars on my face are the consequences of gun violence that were made by assaults with guns. When I actually worked on the place in Brooklyn with one of the highest gun violence rates and deaths in Brownsville, Brooklyn. And we worked to actually improve the safety of the neighborhood and support young people. And the way we did it is we started talking by people that have been touched by the criminal justice system. Number one, then you talk to folks and then they said, hey, listen, we want to thrive, we want to get jobs, we want to have opportunities, we don't have them. So we asked them, what do you want to do? And they said, we like music. So we said, we're going to use the power of the state to get you the jobs and technical skills so that you can get money tomorrow by the time that you finish this program, and then you can improve your living conditions. And then you're going to learn editing skills. And the content of those videos, we're going to project onto the walls, and we're going to do economic activations. And so what is it that made Brownsville safer? Well, Brownsville young folks getting technical skills, recording Brownsville residents, projecting them on the streets, and getting Brownsville people out. No more cameras, no more policing, no crime predictability, opportunity. That's what makes people safer.
I'm sorry, can you directly respond? I want to acknowledge that what you went through sounds horrible, and I'm sorry that you went through that. But to not consider the fact that I have also been someone who has been the victim of violence and crime, in my experience and how that has shaped my view of violence and policing, to not acknowledge the fact that my professional work as an investigator at a public defender's office, as someone who has worked at a law office that was looking at police brutality and inmate abuse, as someone who has been organizing to make sure that we are thinking about how we bring safety to our communities without bringing in the trauma of incarceration back into our communities. As someone who for the second time today has heard, I learned about this not through books or in a library, I find it really astounding that in a forum that is being hosted by women and by organizations of Dominican women, that a Dominican woman's education is still being undervalued as a valuable asset in understanding these issues. And I must say, I have to ask, Oscar, I have to ask, what is the merit right now? Is the goal to make sure that this community has the representation that will actually fight for them, that will show up? Or is the goal to divide the progressive vote in this community?
I appreciate the response. It just does also cut into our time. So if I could just ask for a little bit less of that until the end. Oscar, 30 seconds to respond, and we're wrapping on this. You can, I understand. We're going to give you 40, but you have to choose.
Okay, first things first. I acknowledge your experience as a researcher. Okay, first things first. I acknowledge your experience as a researcher, and I'm also sorry about the injustices that you experience. I am not here to say that you are worthless. I am not saying that. I am here saying that the question was about how do you make people safer in the city government. And I do have that experience, and you can research it. And I didn't just imagine it, I implemented it with results. And I believe that a representative in Congress needs to be able to show work about the things they're saying they can achieve. This is the second time that you have accused me of sexism. And I think that is very important to say. Well, the last thing I'll say. Can I answer the second question? People are not a cake. We're not splitting a vote. People are capable of critical thinking. They can make choices. We earn the right to vote and to be voted. And exercising that right shouldn't be any reason for anybody to be shamed.
Thank you. We're going to leave it there. This is
is loud.
I understand that everybody's very animated and wants to ask your questions, but we do need to wrap up. So this is going to be the last question. We are going to close the forum. We're going to close the forum, but the candidates are going to be around and you can feel free to approach them. We have to honor and respect the church that is hosting us.
Thank you. I have a question for both candidates. As much as I appreciate both of your socialist policies, I think you have a lot in common. The reality is you are not competing against each other. You're competing against a 9-year incumbent who has taken $300,000 from AIPAC, is the chair of the National Hispanic Congressional Caucus. Therefore, I'm quite concerned about the viability of a challenging candidate. Therefore, my question is simple. So as we've seen in November, when Zoran Mamdani won the mayoral race, that was through his campaign knocking 1 million doors, speaking to voters. I'm someone who's been having those conversations. Therefore, how many doors has each of your campaigns knocked thus far, respectively, from your launches in February through today? Ahorita en español, mi pregunta es sencillo. ¿Cuántas puertas han tocado sus campañas respectivamente desde febrero hasta hoy?
Darializa, if you could answer that, please.
My campaign has knocked almost 80,000 doors at this point.
My campaign has knocked about 20,000 doors.
Our thanks again as we wrap for this evening, above all, for your time and your patience, for leaning into this conversation, for showing up this evening and lending of yourself, again, that most valuable asset, your time and your attention. To our candidates, we appreciate the fact that you would have joined us at this forum, this very robust conversation that allowed for us to understand your platforms and yourselves much better. Muchísimas gracias de nuevo por haber participado, por haber estado presente y prestarnos de su tiempo. Muy buenas noches. Gracias.